The rain had been falling all evening, thin, silvery threads slicing through the dark. My wipers struggled to keep up, dragging across the windshield with a tired squeak. The clock on the dashboard glowed 11:42 p.m. I should have been home an hour ago, but I'd lost track of time after the photo shoot. The client wanted extra shots, and I stayed as I always did, chasing perfection through the lens. Photography had always been my quiet escape, the one thing that made sense in a world that often didn't. I liked how the camera saw everything without judgment. It noticed the smallest details, a drop of rain clinging to a window, a fleeting smile, the way light danced across wet pavement. But that night, I wasn't looking through my camera. I was tired. Too tired. My eyelids grew heavy. I blinked hard, trying to stay awake, the radio humming faintly in the background. The rain picked up, pelting harder against the glass. I gripped the steering wheel tighter. The road ahead was nearly invisible, the white lines swallowed by the storm. Then, a flash of headlights. A car swerved into my lane. I gasped, jerking the wheel. Tires screeched, the car spun, and the world turned into chaos. Metal twisting, glass exploding, the violent crash echoing through my skull. Pain bloomed everywhere. My chest hit the steering wheel. My head slammed against something hard. Then silence. The kind of silence that feels endless. Through the blur, I saw smoke curling up from the hood. Rain hissed as it met the heat. My breath came shallow, each inhale burning. I tried to move, but my legs were trapped beneath the dashboard. Panic clawed at my chest. I could taste blood, metallic, warm, and then footsteps. At first I thought I was hallucinating, but through the rain, I saw a figure approaching. The shape was blurry, moving fast, light cutting across his shoulders from another car parked behind him. He wasn't wearing a uniform, just a dark coat soaked through, hair plastered to his forehead. He knelt beside the wreck, peering in through the shattered window. "Hey, can you hear me?" His voice, deep, calm, oddly soothing, cut through the panic like light breaking through fog. "Stay with me, okay?" I tried to speak, but only managed a weak groan. He didn't waste time. I heard the groan of twisted metal as he pulled at the door. It wouldn't budge. He kicked it once, twice. On the third try, it burst open. Rain splashed in. Cold air rushed over me. He reached in carefully, his hands steady even as everything around us burned and screamed. "You're going to be fine," he said softly. "I've got you." Then I felt his arm wrap around my shoulders, strong and sure. He pulled me out, step by step, careful not to jar my injuries. The smell of smoke filled my lungs. My vision swam. All I could do was stare up at him, the rain streaking down his face, his eyes warm and dark even under the storm. Those eyes, they looked almost sad. "You're safe now," he whispered. And that was the last thing I remembered. When I woke again, it was morning. The sunlight hurt my eyes. I blinked at the white ceiling above me, confused by the beeping sound near my bed. A hospital. I tried to move and winced. My ribs ached. My arm was in a cast. There were bandages along my hairline. "You're lucky to be alive," a nurse told me kindly when she came in. "You were in a bad accident." "Was there someone else?" I asked hoarsely. "A man who pulled me out?" She frowned slightly. "The paramedics found you alone. No one else was there when they arrived." I shook my head. "No, he was there. He pulled me out. He talked to me." But she only smiled gently as if humoring me. Sometimes after trauma, our memories play tricks on us. "Rest okay? You've been through a lot." Weeks passed. My wounds healed slowly, but something else stayed, the memory of him. Not clear, not full. Just flashes, the curve of his jaw, the warmth of his eyes, the sound of his voice. I started dreaming about him almost every night. Sometimes he was standing in the rain, his face hidden in shadow. Sometimes he was closer, whispering something I couldn't quite hear. Other times I saw only his hand, reaching out toward me through the fog. Each dream left me breathless. I tried to convince myself it was my mind's way of coping, of giving meaning to what happened. But the dreams felt too real. So real that I started to draw him. First just sketches, quick outlines on scraps of paper. then full portraits. I painted his eyes over and over again until I could almost see them move. Once, I caught myself talking to the painting, asking questions into the silence. Who are you? Why did you save me? Why can't I forget you? No answer ever came. My recovery took months, and when I finally got my strength back, I told myself it was time to move on. To start fresh. The accident had changed me. I saw the world differently now. Everything felt sharper, more fragile, like light captured through a cracked lens. One afternoon, as I was scrolling through job listings, I came across an opening at a publishing firm. Arden and Company. They specialized in travel and art books, beautifully photographed collections that matched my style perfectly. I hesitated, then applied. A week later, I got the call. The interview went well. The HR manager said their creative director, Seo Jihoon, had seen my portfolio and was impressed. The name meant nothing to me then, but I felt a flicker of excitement, and something else. A strange heaviness in my chest, like déjà vu. The night before I started the job, I had another dream. This one was different. The man was standing closer than ever before. I could see his face clearly, the curve of his lips, the soft intensity in his gaze. He reached for me, and this time, I heard his voice clearly. Find me. I woke up with my heart pounding, my pillow damp with sweat. I laughed shakily to myself. It's just a dream, I muttered. That's all it ever was. But even as I said it, a quiet voice inside whispered something else, a feeling I couldn't ignore. That he was real. That somewhere out there, he was waiting. The next morning, I put on a clean white shirt, my camera bag slung over my shoulder, and headed to Arden and Company. The building was tall and sleek, all glass and silver. As I stepped into the elevator, I caught my reflection, pale, nervous, trying to look put together. When the doors opened on the 10th floor, I stepped out into the studio. My new workplace smelled faintly of ink and coffee. People bustled about, chatting over layouts and photo proofs. Minjae, a voice called. I turned toward it, and froze. Standing a few feet away was a man in a charcoal suit, tall, composed, with familiar brown eyes that stopped my heart mid-beat. He looked exactly like the man from my dreams. For a moment, I couldn't breathe. He extended a hand politely, his expression cool and professional. Seo Jihoon, he introduced himself. Welcome to the team. His voice, that same calm, low voice I'd heard through the rain, sent a chill racing down my spine. But there was no recognition in his eyes. Not a flicker. As I shook his hand, the world seemed to blur around us. My pulse hammered in my ears. Because in that instant, I knew. This was him. The man who saved me. The man who now didn't remember me at all. The moment Seo Jihoon's hand touched mine, something inside me stopped. My breath, my thoughts, even the sound of the world around me. His skin was warm, his grip firm but not overbearing, and those eyes, those same deep brown eyes that had haunted my dreams for months. For a second, I couldn't speak. I just stared, trying to memorize every feature. The slight slope of his nose, the sharp cut of his jaw, the faint line between his brows that appeared when he focused. It was him. It had to be. But Jihoon didn't seem to notice the way my fingers trembled in his. He simply gave a polite nod, his voice calm, professional. Welcome to Arden and Company, Minjae. I've heard good things about your photography. I hope you'll live up to the praise. And with that, he turned and walked away. No flicker of recognition. No spark of familiarity. Nothing. It was like being hit by cold water. I followed him numbly into the studio where the creative team worked. Cameras, light stands, and mood boards filled the space. The air smelled faintly of coffee and paper, the kind of organized chaos that felt like home to me. Jihoon walked with quiet confidence. Everyone's eyes followed him, their movements quick and precise, like planets orbiting around their sun. He stopped by a long table and gestured for me to sit. You'll be assisting with the new art book project, he said. We're on a tight deadline, so I expect efficiency. His tone wasn't cruel, but it carried an edge. The kind that didn't invite questions. I nodded quickly. Yes, sir. He gave a brief glance, then returned to his notes. Don't call me sir. Just Jihoon is fine. That simple correction made my heart trip over itself. I wanted to ask him, do you remember me? Do you remember the night of the accident? The rain, the fire, the sound of my voice calling for help? But I didn't. I couldn't. Because what if he really didn't? What if I had imagined it all? The first few weeks were torture, not because the job was hard, but because he was everywhere. Jihoon had a way of commanding the room without raising his voice. He was precise, efficient, sometimes cold. People admired him, feared him a little. But every so often, something would slip through the cracks. A soft word of encouragement, a fleeting smile, a quiet sigh when he thought no one was watching. And in those moments, I saw him, the man who had pulled me from the wreck, rain running down his face, whispering that I was safe. But he never looked at me that way. Not once. Still, small details began to gnaw at me. The way he rolled up his sleeves before focusing on a layout, the exact motion I remembered from that night. The way his voice softened when he said my name. The scent of rain that clung faintly to him sometimes, even on sunny days. Coincidence, I told myself. Just coincidence. But the human heart doesn't listen to reason. Late one evening, I stayed behind to finish editing some photos for the upcoming book. The office was quiet, the city lights glowing through the tall windows. I didn't think anyone else was there, until I heard footsteps. Still here? I turned to see Jihoon standing by the door, his tie loosened, hair slightly messy. He looked tired, the kind of tired that seeps into your bones. I wanted to finish before the meeting tomorrow, I said quickly. He walked closer, studying the photo on my screen. You have a good eye, he murmured. You capture emotion, not just detail. That's rare. My chest tightened. Thank you, I said softly. He leaned forward slightly, adjusting the brightness on the monitor. His arm brushed mine, just lightly, but the touch sent a jolt through me, sharp and electric. I froze, afraid to move, afraid he might notice how my pulse had quickened. Try lowering the contrast, he said, unaware of the storm inside me. It'll bring out the texture better. I nodded, my voice barely steady. Right. When he finally stepped back, I let out a breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding. Nights like that became common. Long hours, quiet conversations, unspoken things that lingered in the air between us. I began to see another side of him. He wasn't cold, he was guarded. He stayed late after everyone left, sometimes staring blankly at the city skyline. Once, I heard him mumble something under his breath, a name, maybe? But I couldn't make it out. He smiled rarely, but when he did, it was faint and fleeting, and it undid me completely. I told myself to stop thinking about him this way. To stop imagining things that weren't there. But it was useless. Every time our eyes met, something inside me stirred, like a faint memory tugging at the edges of my mind. And then came the nights when I began to doubt my own sanity. One evening, as I packed up my gear, I caught Jihoon watching me. He quickly looked away, pretending to check an email. Can I ask you something? I said before I could stop myself. He glanced up. Go ahead. I hesitated. Have we met before? There was a flicker of something in his expression, surprise, maybe, before it vanished. Not that I recall, he said evenly. Why? I forced a smile. You just seem familiar. His gaze lingered on me for a moment longer than necessary. Then he said, maybe I just have one of those faces, and turned back to his screen. But his voice had changed, softer now, uncertain. Weeks passed. My feelings only deepened, twisting into something I couldn't name. Every dream I had of that night blurred into his face. Every word he spoke pulled me further into the confusion I was trying so hard to escape. Then one night, everything changed. It was nearly midnight. We had stayed late again, reviewing photo layouts. Jihoon had been working for days without proper rest. I noticed the dark circles under his eyes, the way his hands shook slightly when he reached for his coffee. Jihoon, I said quietly, you should rest. He shook his head. I'm fine. But minutes later, his words began to slur. He swayed slightly, pressing a hand to his temple. Jihoon. I rushed forward just as his knees buckled. I caught him before he hit the floor, my arms wrapping around him instinctively. He was burning up, his skin hot to the touch. I guided him carefully to the couch in the corner, easing him down. "Hey, stay with me," I murmured, panic rising in my chest. He mumbled something I couldn't understand, his voice weak. As I reached to loosen his sleeve, my fingers froze. There, on his forearm, faint but unmistakable, was a small burn scar, a thin line of pale skin, the same mark I had seen on the hand that pulled me from the wreck. The same hand that had held me while the world fell apart. My breath caught. For a moment, everything around me went silent. The ticking clock, the hum of the lights, even the rain outside. It was him. It had always been him. I stared at his sleeping face, the faint crease between his brows, the exhaustion that dulled his features. My heart pounded wildly. But if he had saved me, why didn't he remember? And why did I suddenly feel that this was only the beginning? That something deeper, darker, was still buried beneath his silence. The next morning, Jihoon didn't show up for work. I told myself it was just exhaustion, that he needed rest after collapsing the night before. But my mind wouldn't stop racing. The burn scar on his arm, the way his hand had trembled in mine. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw flashes of that night again. The rain, the fire, his voice whispering, "You're safe now." I couldn't hold it in any longer. I needed the truth, even if it broke whatever fragile balance existed between us. That evening, I found myself standing outside Jihoon's apartment. The building was sleek, modern, glass and steel, much like him. My heart hammered as I pressed the intercom. For a moment, there was only static. Then his voice came through, low and tired. "Who is it?" "It's me. Minjae." The pause. Then a quiet click. The door unlocked. Jihoon looked pale when he opened the door, a blanket draped over his shoulders. The faint shadows under his eyes made him look softer somehow, more human. "You shouldn't have come," he said, stepping aside to let me in. "I had to," I replied. "You passed out last night. I was worried." He nodded faintly, walking toward the small living room. The air smelled faintly of coffee and rain. He must have just showered. He sat down on the couch, and for a moment, neither of us spoke. The silence between us felt thick, weighted with everything unsaid. Finally, I took a deep breath. "Jihoon, I need to ask you something. And I need you to be honest with me." His gaze flicked up, wary. "What is it?" I hesitated. My throat felt dry. A year ago, there was a car accident. On a highway near the Han River. A man pulled me out of the wreck. I never found out who he was. His expression didn't change at first. He looked calm, too calm. But his fingers tightened slightly against his knee. "Why are you telling me this?" he asked quietly. "Because I think it was you." That broke something in his face. His brows drew together, his jaw tensed. "That's ridiculous," he said quickly. "I've never—" "You have a burn scar," I interrupted. "On your arm. The same place where the man who saved me had one. I saw it last night." He froze. His lips parted slightly, but no words came. For a long time, he just sat there, staring at me as if I'd said something impossible. Then, finally, he looked away. "I don't remember," he murmured. But his voice wasn't firm anymore. It trembled, barely, but enough for me to hear the truth beneath the lie. "You do," I said softly. "You just don't want to." He stood abruptly, pacing to the window. Rain had started falling again, tapping gently against the glass. "You don't understand," he said, his voice strained. "I tried to forget that night. I had to." "Why?" He turned then, eyes dark and stormy. "Because I thought you died." The world tilted. For a moment, I couldn't move, couldn't breathe. "What?" He ran a hand through his hair, his composure cracking with every word. "I was driving home that night. I saw your car spin off the road and hit the guardrail. I didn't think, I just ran. Pulled you out before the fire spread. You weren't breathing at first. I tried CPR. You coughed and I thought you'd be okay." His voice broke slightly. "But when the paramedics came, I had to leave. I was terrified. There were flames, sirens, people shouting. I couldn't stay. He closed his eyes, inhaling shakily. Later, I checked the news. It said the driver didn't survive. I thought. He swallowed hard. I thought I'd failed. So I buried it. Pretended it never happened. The silence that followed was thick, almost suffocating. I stared at him, my mind spinning. You didn't fail, I whispered. You saved me, Jihoon. I'm alive because of you. He looked up then, and the emotion in his eyes nearly undid me. A mix of guilt, disbelief, and something else, raw and fragile. For the first time since I'd met him, he looked human. I've been dreaming about you, I said quietly. Ever since the accident. I kept seeing your face, your eyes, your voice calling me back. I thought I was losing my mind. He exhaled slowly, sinking back onto the couch. Maybe that's why you looked at me like that. The first day you came in. I thought it was fate, I admitted, voice trembling. Or maybe my imagination. But every time you spoke, I remembered. I just didn't know how to ask. We sat there for a long time, the rain filling the silence. I could see the weight of everything pressing down on him, the memories he'd buried, the guilt he'd carried alone. Finally, I reached out, my hand brushing against his. You saved me once, I said softly. You don't have to keep saving me by punishing yourself. He looked at me then, eyes glistening with emotion. I didn't mean to forget you. I know. Something shifted in that moment. The distance between us, the wall of silence, all of it cracked open. Jihoon began to remember more as we talked. Fragments at first, the glow of the dashboard, the smell of gasoline, the way my hand had gripped his coat before I passed out. Then, slowly, more details returned. My voice calling weakly for help, the blood on his hands, the weight of me in his arms as he pulled me out. He spoke in halting words, as though afraid the memories might hurt again. I remember, you opened your eyes for a second. You looked at me. I thought you'd said something. I did, I whispered. I said thank you. He closed his eyes. I thought I imagined it. Tears burned in my eyes, but I smiled through them. No. It was real. He laughed weakly, the sound breaking halfway through. You know, I used to have nightmares about that night. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw fire. I heard the crash. I thought maybe if I worked hard enough, kept myself busy, it would go away. But it never did. And now? I asked. He looked at me, a small, tired smile tugging at his lips. Now, for the first time, it feels like it can finally stop. The rain eased into a drizzle. The air felt lighter, cleaner somehow. Jihoon stood, walking toward the window. The city lights reflected faintly in his eyes. Funny, he said quietly, I saved you that night, but meeting you again, it feels like you're the one saving me this time. I didn't know what to say. So I walked up beside him, standing shoulder to shoulder in the soft glow of the city. For a while, neither of us spoke. We didn't need to. The silence between us wasn't heavy anymore. It was peaceful. When Jihoon finally turned to me, the sadness that had lived in his expression for so long was gone. What remained was gentleness, the same quiet warmth I'd seen that night in the rain. He smiled faintly. You said you're a photographer, right? I nodded. Then capture this, he said softly. So we both remember. The next morning I did. Sunlight poured through the wide studio windows, golden and clean. Jihoon stood near the window, hands in his pockets, the light painting his features in soft warmth. I lifted my camera, focusing carefully. The world seemed to hold its breath. The shutter fell, freezing the moment forever. The man who once saved me, now illuminated in the light he'd unknowingly brought back into my life. As I lowered the camera, he met my eyes, smiling that quiet, knowing smile. And for the first time, I didn't feel haunted anymore. I felt whole.